Hi, good afternoon. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to our special roundtable for today, Taiwan Entangled in the Global Economy, Silicon, Supply Chains, and Geopolitics, sponsored by the University of Washington, East Asia Center, Foster School, Global Business Center, and the Taiwan Studies Program. My name is James Lin. I'm an assistant professor at the University of Washington Jackson School of International Studies, and I'm happy to be your moderator for this discussion this afternoon or this evening or this morning, wherever you might be joining us. For introduction, so I'd like to go ahead and introduce our speakers next. Next slide, please, CJ. First, we have Professor William Kirby. So William C. Kirby is T.M. Zhang Professor of China Studies at Harvard University and Spangler Family Professor of Business Administration at Harvard Business School. He is a University Distinguished Service Professor. At Harvard, he has served as the director of the Fairbanks Center for Chinese Studies, chairman of the History Department, and dean of the Faculty of Arts and Sciences. His current projects include case studies of trend-setting Chinese businesses and a comparative study of higher education in China, Europe, and the United States. His most recent books include Can China Lead, published by Harvard Business Review Press, and China and Europe on the New Silk Road, published by Oxford University Press. Next slide, please. Our next panelist is Ken Sun, who is General Manager of Microsoft Taiwan, where he leads the sales and marketing team across segments and business groups. From cloud services to AI and mixed reality, Ken is responsible for driving strategic planning, national digital transformation partnerships, and growing Microsoft Taiwan's commercial businesses. Prior to Microsoft, Ken served as the country president at Schneider Electric and general manager of National Instruments in Taiwan. Ken is also an alum, a graduate of the University of Washington, and he holds a BS degree in electrical engineering. Next slide, please. Finally, we have Cindy Wang, who is the breaking news editor at Bloomberg News Taipei Bureau. She's responsible for sending market-moving news headlines on a real-time basis and telling the biggest stories of Taiwan's financial markets. Since joining Bloomberg in 2007, Cindy has held several different roles over the years: translator, Greater China market reporter, and finally Taiwan market reporter. Cindy is the co-author of the book Blue Ocean Strategy in Taiwan, published by Commonwealth Publishing in 2006. All right, thank you, CJ. So I just want to give a little bit of background too about the theme of today's panel. So today's panel is inspired by ongoing changes in the global economy, especially during the time of the COVID-19 pandemic that has ravaged supply chains around the world. In contrast to the different changes going on, Taiwan's economic success stands in stark contrast, led by its superlative COVID-19 pandemic response, at least up until this most recent week, as well as success of firms like TSMC. We want to ask, how does Taiwan's involvement in the global economy change? Meanwhile, heightened hostility in US-China relations also loom large in the background, and the United States seeks to address different kinds of security exposures, for example, to Taiwan semiconductors. And so we also want to ask, how do Taiwan's businesses navigate these greater US-China-Taiwan geopolitical forces? So I'd first like to ask our three presenters to give 7 to 8 minutes each, telling us about their perspectives about these questions and about the theme of the panel. Then we'll have a moderated Q&A session where I will be asking a couple of questions of our panelists and having a conversation about those questions. And finally, the last 30 minutes or so, we will open it up to an audience Q&A. For those of you who are watching on YouTube and Facebook, you can directly comment into either of the live streams. Those comments will show up onto our feed, and I will select questions to ask our panelists. So without further ado, I would like to go ahead and ask our panelists to begin. We will start off with Professor William Kirby. Go ahead, Bill.
Thank you very much, James. Thank you for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be here with two very distinguished panelists. Let me just start by saying that Taiwan is an important place to me. Studied and researched as a graduate student, and over the course of my career, I've had the great pleasure of watching it develop steadily and strongly into the highly educated, innovative, and internationalized crossroads that what I want to do, and we can go to the next slide, is we think of these themes of this discussion is to look very quickly at Taiwan's past in order to help us understand its present position and its future. You recall that this island off the coast of Fujian is historically no backwater. It's a place of modernization in the late Qing, next slide, of industrialization and next slide, structure under the Japanese. And when the nationalists arrived in 1945, next slide, a place that was to be the main engine, together with Manchuria, in China's post-war plans of economic recovery and economic development. According to the plans of the already deceased, of course, but the next slide. Next slide. Thank you. In many ways, of course, thought of as once as the father of modern China, without question, the father of the modern Chinese infrastructure state, or the modern Chinese engineering state, whose book, The International Development of China, would be a Bible for nationalist planners on the mainland and on Taiwan. It's worth noting in passing here that Taiwan received an extraordinary number of young Chinese engineers in 1945 and 46, people who had trained abroad in Europe and in North America before and during the war, people who were sent to Taiwan to make it an engine of national recovery, and people who were stuck on the island in 1949, but people who became of nationalist Taiwan's technocracy. Following Sun Yat-sen, next slide, please. Taiwan, following at least his long established guideposts, pursued land reform in a dramatic way. Next, dividing up the land and actually helping to fuel investment for industrialization in the process. Next slide. And following plans inherited from the mainland, Taiwan developed heavy industrial and infrastructure development. Next slide. The prerequisite of what would become Taiwan's great leap outward in exports. Next slide, please. As it is traded strong. Next, as it became an early home of the electronics industry. Next, and shipping to you and me and all of our friends our very first laptops. And it began to do this, next slide, at the height of the Cold War, at a period of great physical danger to Taiwan, next slide, at a time of the one American presidential visit to Taiwan, here President Eisenhower visiting Chiang Kai-shek and Madame in 1960. It began to do this, next slide, under authoritarian, and next slide, and only later under democratic leadership. Let us take the case of TSMC. Next slide. TSMC, of course, here it is at its height, and just very recently, still at its height, of course, Morris Chang, but a place that, or a company that was founded in Hsinchu, a government-led effort of Taiwan's industrial planning to make in Taiwan, in a highly unlikely place, a Silicon Valley for East Asia. And it recruited to this place this Ningbo native, Morris Chang, who as an entrepreneur as well as an engineer would take it to become the greatest company in its industry in the world. One little footnote here, I might say, while we have it, go to the next slide, please. While we have Morris on site, and here he is with President Tsai receiving an award. Morris Chang, you may or may not know, was a Harvard freshman. And as a Harvard freshman, he wanted to be an English major. And when over Christmas break, he told his father he wanted to be an English major at Harvard, his father forced him to transfer to MIT to get a real education. Now, TSMC, it epitomizes, as the next slide does, a combination of the public and the private, of innovation and entrepreneurship, which made it a powerful player once on the mainland and made Taiwan a powerful player once the mainland reopened for on a kind of a Taiwan model. Next slide. And all over all over the world of mainland China. And yet, despite moments of normalization with the mainland, next slide, please, with Mr. Ma and Mr. Xi, and despite extraordinary successes in mainland markets, not the least for TSMC, next slide, please, with this gentleman, Ren Zhengfei, Taiwan is once again, as we all know, and please go to the next slide, at the crossroads of political crossfire, in a seemingly renewed Cold War. Here is, in our next slide, President Trump in his early days calling up the president of China, or Republic of China, his first call to any leader in the world of Greater China. Today, Taiwan is infinitely more important in the global and Chinese economies than ever before. You can go to the next slide, which I believe is simply there, physically where it always has been. It is infinitely more important in the global and Chinese economies than ever before, and yet its political neighborhood remains as dangerous as ever. And it has as much to fear from its friends as it does from its adversaries. And I shall stop there. Thanks very much.
Do I go ahead? Okay. So thank you, Professor Lin, and it's truly an honor to participate in today's panel with Professor Kirby and Cindy. Let me begin by wishing everyone safety and good health. Speaking of disruption, as you know, Taiwan is dealing with our worst domestic outbreak since the pandemic began. But given the resilience of Taiwan, I'm confident we're going to fight this one together. And having been back in Taiwan for the past 20 years, serving a number of industries, including semiconductor, high-tech, cloud, and AI, as general manager of Microsoft Taiwan now, my work is to realize the mission of empowering every person and every organization on the planet to achieve more and to accelerate digital transformation of Taiwan for enterprises, government, and society at large. In regards to today's topic, I'm fortunate to have worked extensively with the high-tech supply chain as a customer, a supplier, and also a partner to many companies here, including TSMC. So for sure, COVID has accelerated digital transformation journey that we're already on. Topics like geo-expansion, geo-diversification, hybrid work, talent upskilling are all disruptions that give Taiwan the opportunity to reposition itself and take the lead in this new normal era. Next slide, please. So just like the rest of the world, when COVID hit, the impact was obviously instant and wide reach. But what's unique about Taiwan was that it was hit the earliest outside of China. I still recall I had US colleagues call me up and say, hey, what's the big deal about COVID? And just sharing some early stories and learnings in February last year. Obviously, school was top of mind for everybody. The kids, couldn't go to school, but how do we keep learning continuous? So I think as a country, we responded very quickly. As Microsoft, we worked with the Ministry of Education through the Open ID project, connecting 2.5 million students and 200,000 educators to use the MOE National ID sign-in to Microsoft 365 platform and Microsoft Teams, and also OneNote for teaching and learning. And also, I remember February last year, the hot topic was obviously masks. And the topic was you can't find them, right? And a citizen developer in 2 days used a cloud platform to quickly develop a line chat app to allow people to locate mask availability. I think that type of innovation quickly really helped Taiwan in the responding stage. And that innovation specifically had over 2 million followers within a few days. Next slide. So our learning is that digital technology and innovation played a critical role in charting the course. As technology provider, we became the digital first responder to the responders. The innovation and agility that digital technology offers enable really fast response from the government, citizen, and enterprises. And moving into the recovery stage, we saw a massive relocation of manufacturing back to Taiwan, including high tech as well as precision machinery. 20 years ago, these industries moved offshore because we didn't offer the scale or the cost advantage. However, last year, they moved back, accelerated as Taiwan had the right ecosystem, innovation, agility, and the capability. One of the key initiatives that I work with a lot with companies was called Pop-Up Factory. And that was really the concept of building a common data and infra platform to support build-up of factories anywhere in the world, offering them agility. So the next stage, Taiwan moved quickly into reimagine stage. Business saw a surge demand of microelectronics need in the digital in the new normal. Examples of that was in high tech. In the early days, we saw 2 months of no business. Everyone was panicking. And then was followed by 6 months of where the bookings went through the roof and we had no supply. We went from a broken supply chain to a shorter, agile supply chain to now a diversified and resilient supply chain. And business saw that being data-driven is the only way to stay connected and resilient in dealing with any disruption that we have at the moment and what's to come in the future. And also with the disrupted supply chain, we saw an opportunity for Taiwan manufacturers to reach the end user customers directly, allowing for new business model innovations. One example I want to share is really imagining Taiwan is also multinational companies investing in Taiwan. So we saw the opportunity to reposition Taiwan for the future of tech, as many digitized industries, including cloud, IoT, electric vehicle, and so forth. Just sharing from Microsoft, in October last year, we announced our largest investment in Taiwan in 30 years of operations here. So we decided to build our 66th global data center region in Taiwan, and also set up our largest cloud hardware infrastructure engineering service team outside of the US in Taiwan. And also we made a commitment to train over 200,000 tech talents in Taiwan over the next 4 years. Next slide, please. So TSMC, as Professor Kirby mentioned, is for sure the benchmark for Taiwan in terms of digital tech. It's also a great example of reimagining silicon as a service to serve the world's needs. We saw a clear shift in their mindset to fully embrace the latest technologies like cloud and AI, and to drive tech intensity. And we define tech intensity as one, adopting the latest technologies in cloud and AI, and at the same time build their own IP and capabilities on top of these platforms. In terms of TSMC challenges, I think simply put, I say 3 things. One is obviously capacity expansion. Number 2 is they have to de-risk from the power and water shortages that we're seeing more and more severe in Taiwan. And thirdly, the geopolitical pressure that's very apparent to everybody. And the solution the company embarked on is kind of 3 transformational agenda. The first one being global expansion. So as we see in the news that they've made their largest investment outside of Taiwan in Arizona, $35 billion fab expansion plan. And it's going to be the largest outside of Taiwan in a very big way. The second transformational agenda is really digital transformation itself, and how to embrace digital technology to empower employees, optimize operations, and also to engage customers, offering better resiliency, security, agility, and faster time to market. And one example is the TSMC Open Innovation Platform. If you see in the top left-hand corner of that picture, that initiative is actually started by Dr. Morris Chang. It's an initiative in a comprehensive technology infra platform to reduce design barrier and to improve first-time silicon success. The OIP promotes its ecosystem partners using TSMC's IP in the design implementation stage, and also design for manufacturing, and in the process technology and backend services. So Microsoft, we played an inaugural member role to start the TSMC Cloud Alliance in OIP to enable IC design in the cloud to accelerate time to market and lifting traditional computational limitations. I think this has proved to be very resilient in the disruption, that we are able to offer not only this tight partnership, but really a complete end-to-end solution to enable the ecosystem to stay very live and also continue to thrive in this time of chaos. And the third initiative is really about talent incubation. As the current chairman Liu has mentioned many times openly, that the biggest challenge for them in the next few years is really talent recruitment. And this is not just in the mass number of engineers that they need to hire, but really in the type of engineers they need to hire. So really he called out the cross-industry talent. More and more we see OT and IT converging. Also, they realize now everyone needs to be a software engineer in this connected world, in a digitized world. And also really a diversity in talent and experience, and also a new talent fresh from college. So the bottom left corner is a picture of Microsoft partnering with TSMC to hold the career hack for 2 years straight. Really, it's an effort to, number one, I would say, really change the impression, if you will, of working in a fab, right? Traditionally, you kind of imagine wearing the clean coat in a clean room and really working with machines only. But more and more, it's about working collaboratively and being more innovative, being more hands-on with cloud, IoT, and AI and mixed reality technology. So together, we've been able to incubate future talent and also help recruit new types of talent into TSMC and really strengthen their current employee base and prepare for the future of digital transformation. So next slide. So with that quick introduction, I want to summarize kind of 3 learnings during this time. One is that for sure, digital technology is core to businesses and industries in terms of resiliency and agility. And Microsoft has a huge role to play in empowering Taiwan to master that technology, master data, and also to drive tech intensity. Secondly, with cloud as a secure foundation, it really breeds more innovation and economic growth. And for a company like TSMC, where they have about 60% market share, this is really a positive flywheel effect. The faster we innovate, really the better we go to market and more businesses in the end for TSMC and Taiwan at large, right? So, and also we want to mention, this innovation is not just with semiconductor. We see the strength now happening in IoT, electric vehicles, healthcare, and it's really a chance for Taiwan to reposition itself as Asia's next AI hub. Last but not least, innovation comes from talent. Taiwan really needs to continue to invest in nurturing future talent and also to contribute to the innovation to the world. Again, as Microsoft, we're committed to train over 200,000 tech talent in the next 4 years, working with cross-industry leaders across healthcare, semiconductor, high tech, and to breed talent together. And with that, thank you very much, and I'll pass to Cindy.
Hello, everyone. My name is Cindy Wen. I'm based in Taipei. As the breaking news editor at Bloomberg News, I basically handle all the major news happening in Taiwan. So today I'm going to focus my presentation on 3 things that I think made Taiwan so hot nowadays. I believe the 3 reasons are the chip shortage, and then geopolitical tension, and then the final thing is COVID. So Taiwan's role in the world economy largely existed below the radar until it came to recent prominence as the auto industry suffered shortfalls in chips. We've seen car makers around the world are all forced to hold production and idle plants. So Taiwan's importance has suddenly become too big to ignore. Next slide, please. Then we've seen that all the car makers around the world are lobbying their governments for help and asking Taiwanese government and chip makers like TSMC to step in and make more chips. As we can see today that modern cars are relying more on semiconductors than ever before. Next slide, please. So how bad is the crisis? We believe that the chip shortage are expected to wipe out 61 billion or up to over 100 billion over the sales of car makers this year. So that's really a bad news for the car industry. Then why is the shortage in the first place? That's because the short answer is, of course, the pandemic. Because we're all working from home, we need more webcams and monitors, etc. That all drives up the need for chips. And then automakers that cut back chips orders very drastically early in the pandemic, and then they underestimate how quickly those car sales will rebound. So that's why when they rush to reorder more chips in late 2020, it's already too late. Next slide, please. Now, who are the big players in the chip industry? As Professor Kirby and General Manager Sun all pointed out, that Taiwan's TSMC, it's the world's most advanced chip maker, and its clients, including Apple and Qualcomm, they're the key customers. It's the leader in the foundry business. And other than TSMC, in US, there is Intel. That's the last US champion in the field. It has more revenue than any other chip maker in the world, and its business is heavily concentrated in making its own brand chips. And in Asia, there is another powerhouse, that's South Korea Samsung, which dominates in memory chips. So nowadays, we've seen that only like 20%, only about 12% of semiconductors are made in US, while 75% of semiconductors are manufactured in Asia. Next slide, please. Then why can't we make more chips then? That's because chip making is a very costly battle. We've seen in this table here that TSMC already said in April that they will ramp up its capital expenditure over the next 3 years to $100 billion US. And Samsung is also earmarking about $116 billion for a decade-long project to catch up with TSMC. And Intel also promised that they will spend about $20 billion to build 2 new fabs in Arizona. It's super expensive to make chips. It costs tens of billions of dollars to build a fab, and it also needs to run 24/7 to recruit the investment. And that's why the problem is not easy to fix right away, because it takes time to make chips. Next slide, please. So when will this shortage end? In short, we can see that chip lead times, that means the gap between ordering the chip and taking delivery, increased to 17 weeks in April. That indicates users are getting more desperate to secure supply, and that shows the chip shortage continues to worsen. So in short answer, I think this component shortage or chip shortage could last quite some time, as the problem is difficult to fix. And this whole thing shows how TSMC's chip-making skills have handed Taiwan political and economic leverage in a world where technology is being enlisted in the great power rivalry between the US and China. But the great worry is that TSMC's chip factories could become a collateral damage if China were to invade Taiwan one day. Then we need to talk about the second reason why Taiwan is so hot nowadays. Next slide, please. That's the geopolitical tension. As Professor Kirby just pointed out, that we can see from the map as well, Taiwan is only 80 miles away from China. Taiwan is located at the midpoint of the first island chain and occupies a strategic position. And Taiwan has long been the most volatile issue between the US and China due to its strategically important location and now a critical supplier of semiconductors and other high-tech goods. So that's why the Taiwan have a very strategically important position right now. Next slide, please. A few stats about Taiwan. Taiwan's population is about the same as Australia. It's about 23.5 million. And its GDP is about top 20 globally. And China is Taiwan's biggest trading partner. Share of exports to China rose to 44% last year. Next slide, please. And we've seen cross-strait tensions started to rise after Taiwan elected the pro-independence president Tsai Ing-wen of the Democratic Progressive Party in 2016. Tsai was re-elected last year after voicing support for Hong Kong's pro-democracy protests. And she also rejected Chinese President Xi Jinping's bottom line that both sides of the strait belong to one China. Beijing has responded by cutting off communication, curbing travel, and resuming efforts to lure away Taiwan's few remaining diplomatic partners. And cross-strait tension is rising further as US-Taiwan ties warm up amid the deteriorating US-China ties. So in response to that, China's People's Liberation Army has steadily ratcheted up the frequency and intensity of its flights close to Taiwan in the past year to underscore its claim to sovereignty over Taiwan. PLA made 380 sorties into Taiwan's Air Defense Identification Zone, or ADIZ, in 2020. ADIZ is a buffer zone of international airspace where Taiwan reserves the right to intercept unidentified aircraft. And the largest single-day incursion took place in April this year. That's about 25 Chinese military planes flew into the southwest section of Taiwan's Aegis. So the US-China clash over Taiwan has reemerged as one of the world's biggest geopolitical risks now. And that's what people are talking about these days and worry about, of course. Next slide, please. And inside Taiwan, after China's moves in recent years to tighten control over Hong Kong, including passing the controversial national security law last year, polls reveal a steadily rising share of Taiwanese in favor of independence, the thing that's most likely to provoke a military move by China on Taiwan. Almost a third of the population now supports immediate or eventual independence. That's a record high. That's shown in this slide in purple and yellow, as you can see. And those in favor of unification with China fell to less than 10%, as shown in the slide in the color of orange and gray. Still, there are some 50% of the survey respondents expressed the preference for maintaining the status quo in Taiwan. I remember that Australia Defense Minister said in April that the chance of conflict involving China over Taiwan should not be discounted. He added that China has been increasingly clear about its reunification ambitions with Taiwan. So the situation in the Taiwan Strait is worth watching right now. Next slide, please. And last but not least, Taiwan's COVID-19. That's the thing that made Taiwan to the front page of the global news again today. In fact, Taiwan's COVID-19 containment has been so successful for the past 18 months. Taiwan set a record of over 250 days without a local case last year. That's from April to December. And lives in Taiwan were largely normal in 2020. There was no lockdown of the economy. It's like COVID never exists in Taiwan. So Taiwan was one of the most successful places in the world to contain the virus before this month. Next slide, please. We can see that at Bloomberg's COVID resilience ranking, Taiwan ran among top 5 globally. That's as of April, so that's the latest COVID ranking. Because before May, there was basically no local case in Taiwan. Next slide, please. But things changed lately after a high level of complacency about the risk had set in among both the public and authorities. Taiwan just reported over 1,000 local cases in the past few days. It's a small number in global terms, but it's a shocking one locally because before May, Taiwan just had about 1,100 cases during the entire pandemic. So it basically doubled in the past few days. And Taiwan is especially vulnerable. Next slide, please. Because Taiwan has very, very few vaccines. Despite that, the government has secured 20 million doses of COVID-19 vaccines. It has only taken delivery of less than 1 million of the AstraZeneca's vaccine so far. So it's close to zero vaccination in Taiwan. By comparison, China has administered for about 14% of its population, while more than 1/3 in the US and more than 30% in the UK. So Taiwan government is struggling to contain the outbreak now. It has closed schools, limited social gatherings, and urged people to stay at home as they try to avoid a hard lockdown. Health Minister Chen Shizhong expressed confidence yesterday that Taiwan will not enter a hard lockdown, saying officials are working hard to stay on top of the sources of all new infections. It remains to be seen whether these measures can really be proven to be successful, because people are worried that a hard lockdown will potentially affect the chip production, and that would make the chip shortage crisis even worse. I certainly hope that those measures can be proven successful. And that's the end of my presentation. Thank you very much for your attention. Back to you, James.
All right. Thank you so much, Bill, Ken, and Cindy for these excellent presentations. And definitely there is a lot of concern on this side of the Pacific as well for the well-being of Taiwanese people. So I do hope that there's an improvement to that situation soon. So for this part of our roundtable, I have a few questions of my own I'd like to pose to all of you. Hopefully we can have kind of an informal chat and to speak to each other about these different questions. The first question I had is, how has the COVID-19 pandemic affected Taiwan's businesses and Taiwan's trade and economic relations with the US, China, and the rest of the world? Now, of course, I think all of your presentations have already answered this to some degree, so we can go more in depth into this question. I think I'd first like to ask Cindy to respond to this. Your slides have already gone quite in depth into this, and I appreciate that look. What do you think about kind of the future in terms of the next 6 months to a year, now that vaccines are on the horizon for some economies? You mentioned the uncertainty in terms of Taiwan's current response. What do you believe will be the kind of effect of the upcoming changes in the economy and Taiwan's economic relations with the rest of the world?
Okay. Yeah, we've just had a new delivery of vaccine yesterday. So the vaccines that Taiwan had so far will be about like 0.7 million of doses. And it's actually not much of a concern in terms of business production, because those high-tech companies, they're all well prepared. And in those fabs, they have very high-tech equipment and actually very less human contact. So some experts already said that they don't think the Taiwan's tech companies or even the economy would take too much of a hit from the COVID pandemic that we've seen so far. And actually, Taiwan has did pretty well last year in terms of, as the great benefit of the COVID-19 pandemic. Take TSMC as an example. The COVID pandemic further cemented its dominance in the semiconductor industry. TSMC's 2020 profit increased 50%. That's the speediest rate of expansion since 2010. And company now is worth about $530 billion US. That's more than double of Intel's market value. And the strong demand for tech products also boosted Taiwan's exports last year, which rose to a record high. So did Taiwan's trade surplus. And the biggest contributor for the exports, of course, come from the electronic components. Its shipments amounts rose to record high, accounting for almost 40% of total shipments. One interesting thing is that both China and US, they increased their orders to Taiwan in 2020. Taiwan's exports to China grew about 15% year on year. That's mainly due to the semiconductors and key electronic components as Chinese companies increased their imports amid the US-China trade war. And Taiwan's exports to US also rose to the highest in the decade last year. Like both China and US want to build their own supply chain, and now US accounts for around 15% of Taiwan's exports as Taiwan's third biggest market now. And the trend is expected to continue this year. Taiwan's exports to US have grown almost 30% in the first 4 months of the year. That shows Taiwan benefits from restricting of the global supply chain amid the US-China rivalry. And so I think, to sum up, the outlook remains robust for Taiwan as the US and parts of Europe begin to emerge from the worst of the coronavirus pandemic. And the 5G and digital transformation will drive demand for Taiwan's tech component until 2022. Thank you, James.
Thank you, Cindy. I'd like to open this question as well to Bill and Ken, if any of you would like to jump in and offer your thoughts about how the COVID-19 pandemic has affected Taiwan's businesses and relations with the rest of the world.
Ken, you want to start?
Sure. Thank you, Professor Kirby. So obviously, I think many of us have touched on kind of the ironic situation in Taiwan, where globally impacted, but Taiwan in some way benefited through our exposure through high tech and export-driven nature. And just a couple of numbers to show how strong it is. The first time in 30 years that the GDP growth was faster than China, and also the Q1 PMI, Manufacturing Purchasing Manager Index, was at 65, which is really tremendous, right? Considering the future expansion that we see. And I think it's a couple of reasons for this, right? I think number one is the demand, as many of us called out, the digital transformation trend, the need to be hybrid work, stay connected, has really driven up demand in microelectronics and clearly benefiting Taiwan. But at the same time, I think two other movements is one called out the moving back of manufacturing into Taiwan. I think proven now it's the agility and also a faster time to market. Innovation is more and more important in the new normal. I think many companies now see Taiwan as really a hotbed to be doing manufacturing or industry 4.0, if you will. Really being more of a data-driven concept rather than just traditional low-cost, massive production. And also the third trend I see is really mentioned multinational companies investing in Taiwan. The numbers from the Ministry of Economic Affairs shared that foreign investments exceeded $40 billion last October. And companies like Microsoft, Tesla, many other big multinational companies are also taking the opportunity to invest very big in Taiwan, whether it's infrastructures like data centers or research and design centers, or also services entities, right? So I think that really positions Taiwan well, not just during the COVID now, but really positioned us well for the new normal, right? As again, when things become more digitized and connected, and also more and more agility is no longer just a buzzword, but something we need to live by. I think Taiwan is really well positioned with that investment, innovation, and talent moving forward.
Well, let me just add, these are excellent points with which I entirely agree. And I have to say, in a personal sense, I have a stake in all of this. I'm the chairman of the Taiwan Fund Inc. It's a New York Stock Exchange company that invests in Taiwan securities, primarily in the semiconductor area. And we have an outstanding investment advisor in Taipei. And this has been a stellar last 18 months for that fund. I would just worry, Chris, maybe it's the job of historians to worry about what human beings can do in an otherwise auspicious situation. Where the pandemic has given Taiwan advantages that in many ways more quickly than it might otherwise have. We're all talking with each other on, in my case, a whole new set of screens, new hardware, new lighting, everything. A good part of it conceived in Taiwan by Taiwan companies, even if manufactured on the mainland. Taiwan has really benefited from all the time we've spent doing nothing except talking to each other on Zoom or other formats of this sort. And it will continue to do so because the quality is so great. The risks are, we have to look at the one thing I think with Cindy, I might disagree with ever so slightly, or more than slightly, the sense that Taiwan has benefited at the moment from the tensions between the United States and China. I'm not sure that's true if you look at the semiconductor industry several years from now and where Taiwan's markets on the mainland, will they have continued to grow or will they shrink? I don't know. But in the long run, people have invested and continue to invest in Taiwan, rightly in my view, on the belief that the geopolitical tensions are manageable. And when they appear not to be manageable, then it's a new ballgame altogether. And at least from the standpoint of the history of the last half century or so, the best security for Taiwan, in my view, involves a good relationship, not a bad one, between Washington and Beijing.
Very interesting perspective. Cindy, do you want to reply to that last comment from Bill, or do you think we should move on to the next question? I'll leave this open to you, Cindy.
Yeah, I totally agree. Of course, no one wants war, because if there's a war in this region, it's gonna be a huge disaster for not just only this region. Will be a huge disaster for the world, for the tech industry, and everything related to that. So I totally agree with Professor Kirby on that.
All right. Well, since Bill has already kind of broached the topic, I thought we could maybe address the question that I have that deals with this. So this question is, how have geopolitics such as US-China tensions, threatening PRC behavior in the Taiwan Strait, or the Biden administration's moves to decrease dependencies on Taiwan semiconductors affected Taiwan's businesses? how has the US relationship with Taiwan changed as firms like TSMC have become increasingly important to US economy and security. And so for this one, I thought I could reach out to have Bill speak first, if that's all right. You've already given us some thoughts about what would be best in Taiwan's interest. How do you see this from maybe a historical or a geopolitical perspective?
Well, I think one of the worrisome things just simply one of the things to worry about is, just as we concluded the last month, the biggest risk is geopolitics. The risk is not innovation. The risk is not technology. Taiwan is at the top of that world. The risk really is geopolitics. In the long run, some of the risks will be a Taiwan that itself may not have sufficient engineering and other talent to grow at the rate that a company such as TSMC needs to grow. That's one of the reasons of TSMC's early investments in the mainland, and perhaps part of a reason for its investment in Arizona. But the American always says it believes in free trade, and yet it tries to manage through sanctions and threats and other things a world of trade that is often anything but free. So keeping Taiwan's technology businesses from selling in whole or in part to mainland Chinese customers, such as Huawei, is a major intervention in this world, and not necessarily good news. Definitely not good news for the Taiwan side. And this has contributed in part to the continuing downward spiral of cross-strait relations. And so one of the big challenges, and I would be really interesting to hear Ken and Cindy on this, one of the big challenges for Taiwan businesses today, how do you present yourself as a trusted partner to both mainland Chinese and American customers?
A very good question. I'll let Ken and Cindy, if either of you would like to respond to that.
Ken, you want to go ahead?
That's a tough one. I think, the topic of trust is something that I think every company deals with, but especially, like you said, companies in Taiwan, because I don't want to say you want to pick sides, but, more and more we're forced in the middle to deal with this complexity. But I can speak to some of the opportunities that we do see when we position ourselves right. I think one example is in the electric vehicle industry. As Cindy talked about, how digital content in cars is increasing exponentially because of autonomous driving, electrification, mobility as a service. So I say not only Taiwan is well positioned as a semiconductor manufacturer in that sense, but at the same time, we really see a reset and reshuffling of the entire value chain, which is previously dominated by traditional automotive makers in the US or in Europe, right? So for example, like Foxconn, it's redefining itself as the world's maker for EV platforms. And it's really led the effort to develop an open electric vehicle ecosystem called MIH, now with over 2,000 vendors. And those vendors come from Taiwanese players, China players, Europe, the US players. So I think it's really found a really unique position where it tries not to be stuck in one identity, but really drive more of an open innovation platform to serve the world as the world's EV maker. I think it's to be seen how that will turn out, but I'd say so far it's really getting strong traction and really impacting the industry in a big way globally. And the other example I want to mention is healthcare. Right. I think in the last 6 months, we've been working closely with the NTU Hospital, National Taiwan University, researchers to utilize, cloud's high performance compute capabilities to accelerate genomic research for COVID-19 patients. And the reason why Taiwan plays a role is really, I'll say 3 things that Taiwan is sitting on, which is super valuable. Number one is, I think people may know, we have over 20 years of national health insurance data with over 99.9% coverage, which is super unique anywhere in the world, right? And that data is just prime for any type of healthcare research. And combined with patient digital health data, right? I think Taiwan healthcare in general, in addition to healthcare insurance, but just the hospital information systems have also been advanced, digitized early on. So I think that set of data is super valuable. And we correlate those two types of data with the third, which is the biobank genomic data. It really makes Taiwan a unique place to do healthcare and genomic research. So it's really great to see Taiwan thrive again during COVID, to leverage that unique positioning and contribute that to the world at large, right? Really contribute to whether it's vaccine research or really a COVID treatment research. So again, I'm not the expert on geopolitics, and I understand the complexity, right? Being the country GM of Taiwan, but at the same time, I've been trying to work with industries in Taiwan to help navigate, right? Really to kind of get away from this pure China versus rest of the world tension, and to really thrive on the new innovation in new sectors for Taiwan, like EV and healthcare.
Thank you, Ken. It sounds a lot like there's just a lot of opportunities in Taiwan that it seems like, regardless of where you might be located, that these provide incentives to work together with Taiwanese firms. So yeah, it's a very interesting perspective. Cindy, is there anything you would like to add? What do you think?
Yes. So Taiwan's grip on the semiconductor business represents a choke point in the global supply chain, and that's now given new urgencies to plans from Tokyo to Washington and Beijing to increase their self-reliance on chips. So since late 2020, we've seen that governments from American, European, Japanese, or Korean that's called on Taiwan and angling to persuade Taiwan's government or TSMC to serve their national interests. So TSMC is obviously front and center at all these. And how does a company like that deal with all these conflicts or different interests? We can use some examples, like TSMC announced in 2020 that it plans to build a 12 billion chip plant in Arizona. That's a decision designed to allay the U.S. national security concerns and also shift more high-tech manufacturing to America. And that's a decision not easy to make, I believe, because their management have been repeatedly saying in previous investors conference that it's very expensive to build a plant in the U.S. and there are some problems like the supply chain issue, like talent issue, all that. So they still come to that decision in the final stage. So I think that Asian chip makers' U.S. investment underscore the delicate balance it needs to strike between its huge roster of American clients and China, because Beijing is also ambitioning to creating a world-class domestic semiconductor industry. And that plan has unnerved Washington, which fears that the country's technological ascendancy may pose a longer threat. So executives at TSMC, the company which operates plants both in China, in Nanjing and Shanghai, and now mostly in Taiwan, so they have to emphasize that the company is neutral. They don't want to take sides. So just after they announced the plan to build a US fab last year, they also announced new plans to expand the capacity in their Nanjing plants this year. So I think the company is trying to strike the delicate balance between the two superpowers. And just bear in mind that TSMC gets about 61% of its annual revenue from the US, but its second biggest market is in China. That takes about 20%. So TSMC can justify its decision to expand in US. That means the company can move closer to their clients, but also at the same time, they can still expand more capacity in China as well.
So James, if I could add just one perspective here, I think one of the more interesting things to look at over time is what is the decision-making process in TSMC about when, for example, to expand on mainland, when to expand or where to expand internationally, when in Taiwan. And I remember very strongly in the first, I've written, I think, 3 Harvard Business School cases on TSMC. And the very first one was about their mainland investment. And that was at a time, their first mainland investment was during the presidency of Chen Shui-bian, when the DPP government was very restrictive on the kind of technology that could be exported. The US was restrictive on it too, but there was a great fear that it would go further and further and further. And one senior executive at TSMC, when I asked him the question, why do you go to mainland China? It's not cheaper. A fab costs what a fab costs wherever it is in the world, really. The labor in the long run is not going to be cheaper. You can be closer to your customers, which then were mostly international customers in mainland China. But the real reason, they said to me, was to get out of Taiwan. That is to say, so that we would not be restricted by an island that seemed to be, in that period, self-isolating in technological terms, too protective of this. And I remember it in particular because when I was talking with Morris Chang about the case, my original title for the case was TSMC, a Taiwan company's mainland strategy. And he changed the title. He said, no, it should be a global company's mainland strategy. And this is a company that is a global company. And it has, and the last thing I'll say on this is that it's interesting that the worse relations are between the mainland and Taiwan, and sometimes the greater the impetus for TSMC to invest on the mainland, to have access to the customers, to show, to be in that market. And some of the biggest investments recently that TSMC has made on the island of Taiwan have been in a period of apparent normalization during the presidency of Ma Ying-jeou. Because if you can trade easily and freely across the strait without political tensions, of course you would rather build in Taiwan with better intellectual property protection, with a better legal system, and so on. And so the better the relationships across the strait politically, the greater the investment in Taiwan itself. A little counterintuitive, but seems to be true.
That's a very interesting point, Bill. It also reminds me of something that Ken mentioned, and I thought maybe we could talk about a little bit more too, which is the reinvestment in Taiwan. I think that Ken pointed to the kind of talent pool that exists in Taiwan. Bill is pointing to how improved China-Taiwan relations encourages Taiwanese firms actually, ironically, to stay in Taiwan. I'm also thinking about what does the COVID-19 pandemic do to this as well. We're seeing some, I guess some people call it reshoring, the reversal of offshoring, such that with the different kinds of roadblocks that are resulting from supply chain disruptions, that it actually makes sense for some Taiwanese firms to reshore their manufacturing or other facilities back to Taiwan. Are you seeing this as well? And is this something that we might see continue past the pandemic? I'd like to open that to anyone who has a thought about that.
Yeah, maybe I can kick it off and add to what I mentioned earlier. I think the reason for this reshoring is really, I think, two things. One is innovation that I think all three of us talked about, and the other is talent, right? And just to give some examples of that, right? I talked about the mask app that was developed in 2 days and got 2 million followers. The other one's really, an AI-based mask detection machine. It was an IoT-based solution, right? And when everyone, was panicking, at hospitals, everyone is shortage of manpower, and everyone wants to be de-risked from being exposed to the virus. We do need to apply technology to help us, right, empower us during this time. And again, we work with companies in Taiwan, the entire IoT ecosystem, to develop the solution within 2 weeks' time. And then that was deployed in a real hospital environment. And later that solution was exported to help other countries in the world that was dealing with the rise of COVID. So again, that type of innovation is really just amazing that comes from Taiwan, because it really has the ecosystem to land that innovation and to land that minimum viable product and really scale that globally, right? And also another innovation I wanted to share is during COVID, to keep these production lines running is definitely not a small task. So there's one story that ASML, as you know, it's one of the largest equipment makers in the semiconductor supply chain, work with a leading semiconductor company in Taiwan that I can't mention the name, but it's the leading one, to really work together across US, Netherlands, Kaohsiung, Hsinchu, to have mixed reality as the solution to help them do a remote assist and also what they call connected field services, right? And again, we work with companies in Taiwan, the entire IoT ecosystem, to develop the solution within 2 weeks' time. And then that was deployed in a real hospital environment. And later that solution was exported to help other countries in the world that was dealing with the rise of COVID. So again, that type of innovation is really just amazing that comes from Taiwan, because it really has the ecosystem to land that innovation and to right? Because you can no longer fly in the expert equipment engineer from Netherlands, but how do you really keep your production and machines running, right? So I think that was really a huge breakthrough, again, of innovation and the talent that was what put that together so quickly. That helped to prove Taiwan to be so resilient, and also for semiconductor companies, manufactured to go nonstop, right? So I think that type of stories really are super impactful, and we see that as a lighthouse to really shine on other countries and other industries that are going through this and trying to stay resilient and agile during this time.
If I may, I can add some point in terms of investment. Well, I can add some background information. I remember that when the US-China trade war first broke out, it's about 2 years ago. Some people or economists are very pessimistic about Taiwan's economic outlook because China is Taiwan's biggest trading partner, and the close economic and trade relationship with China and all the investments and the fact that we have millions of Taiwanese working in China, it's gonna hurt Taiwan very badly if China is going to suffer from the trade war. But in fact, to everybody's surprise, Taiwan actually didn't do too badly during that year, because Taiwan government launched an incentive program that year to attract those overseas Taiwanese companies returning to Taiwan and invest locally. And then now that it's about 2 years now, the government said there are almost more than 1,000 investment cases with like 1.2 trillion NT dollars coming back. And that shows the companies, they are trying to diversify their production bases and shift part of their production back to Taiwan, and to make them more resilient from those geopolitical tensions and risk. And other than that, we've also seen that during the tech boom these days, Taiwanese companies are investing very heavily at home in an effort to keep up the surging overseas demand for the technology components. Of course, that's in semiconductors in particular. In the past months alone, a smaller rival of TSMC is called the UNC, and also another company called Nanya Technology that have both announced new investment worth billions of dollars in Taiwan only to build up a new fabs to expand the semiconductors capacity. So investment is going to be another important support for Taiwan's economic growth this year as well. That's thanks to the government's incentive programs, but also the tech demands.
All right. Was there anything else that any of you would like to add? No? All right. Well, in this case, just looking at the time, I'd like to make sure that we leave some time for audience questions. A number of comments have already begun to stream in, so thank you for all these questions from our audience members. As a reminder, feel free to leave a comment in YouTube or Facebook, whatever stream you're using. We will see those comments, and I will select some of those for us to discuss. We have a couple of really good questions from University of Washington faculty Maria Ankerdogui, who also teaches on East Asian science, technology, and business innovation. There's a really interesting one that she's asking about brain drain. And so her question is, could someone comment on the problem of Taiwanese talent going to China due to higher salaries? I've heard many semiconductor engineers have been attracted to China from Taiwan. So I feel like actually all of you could probably respond to this. So I'd like to hear from Ken about talent. I think, Bill, you might actually have written about SMIC, which is one of these major kind of Chinese competitors to TSMC. And I'm also sure that Cindy has something to add about, I feel like Bloomberg has also reported on the SMIC, TSMC issues in the past. So whoever would like to, feel free to take this, go ahead and jump in.
Ken, you're elected to start.
Yeah, regarding talent, if I can pivot a little bit away from just semiconductor talent, because I think that talent pool is very specialized. So I think that situation, I think, yes, I do see, China as being an attractor and really being a competitor of talent, between Taiwan and China. I want to speak to talent for high-tech industry at large, right? I think I think that one is where, again, our investments in Taiwan, we have seen that Taiwan to be really a prime place to have this type of talent, because really the basic math and engineering skills are very much solid and prevalent in Taiwan. So we think that's really the foundation of talent to move forward. And secondly, I think the learning acumen, I think, is really a key one, because we talk about growth mindset, where it's not about what you know, but really what you can learn, right, in this new normal, right? Because there's such all the convergence of industries and all the new innovation. It's not something we really learn directly out of college, right? It's really something you have to work across industries, I've mentioned, and really learn from each other and really learn from hands-on doing, right? So again, going back to the career hack that we work on with TSMC, I think that's exactly what they're trying to get at. Right, and typically in the old way of the recruit, it's very standard. You take a resume, you look at what they've written, and then you do some technical assessment, and you try to give the person a job. But then TSMC again has realized in this new normal, the type of talent that they're looking for is very, very different from what they had before, right? So I think that career hack is really kind of embodiment of the talent that we're now looking for in semiconductor and also high tech industry at large, and also. I think one more mega trend that's changing this talent pool is really now it's a world where people work from anywhere, right? So again, now we're not really talking about working from home or working in the office. It's really hybrid work, right? I don't know what's going to be in the future after COVID, but I think all of us enjoy a little bit of this, being work anywhere, right, and having some autonomy. At the same time, we all miss, right, being in the office and working with our coworkers. So I think this type of hybrid work allows talents to be really positioned now anywhere rather than being locked in Taiwan or China or the US, right? I mean, I'm seeing that change happening in multinational companies like the one I'm in. But also I'm seeing that starting to be part of the conversation with local companies here as well, right? How to really leverage the hybrid work environment and attract more talent anywhere in the world.
Bill or Cindy?
Sure. I mean, I could take a kind of a longer view of that kind of talent question. I just finished writing a book on the future of universities, of a series of case studies of German, American, and Chinese universities, leaders of the 19th century, the 20th century, and maybe or maybe not the 21st century, in that order. And it's the competition for talent, or above all, the cultivation of talent at any place, at any time, is truly key to a country's prosperity and its development. And Taiwan, like its health system, has developed an extraordinary educational system. The educational system was extraordinary even before the health system was. And yet, I worry about a certain plateauing, not of the quality of people or the institutions. They're great institutions, but in fact, they're so great and they're all at home that there's less incentive to go abroad. And it used to be, you can look at the statistics, the number of people graduating from Taiwan's great universities who seek PhDs internationally has declined quite precipitously over the last several decades. It used to be very common to go and do PhD, and of course it still is, at University of Washington, at Berkeley, Michigan, Harvard, Princeton, wherever. It's much less common today. And indeed, we at Harvard have put together some new programs to try to attract from Taiwan engineers and other people in all disciplines, working actually with the Ministry of Education to bring individuals who otherwise might not come. So that strikes me as a long-term, not a short-term, but a long-term risk, because in order to be the best, you have to test yourself against the best in the world, and that includes mainland China. Taiwan is, there are a limited number of graduates from Taiwan's superb universities, but it is a limited number. I remember when President Ma was in office, he had an idea and a plan to open up universities to more mainland students, to a considerably greater number of mainland students. And this is not a terrible idea at all. And it would be supremely attractive to the absolute best students from the mainland to come and be in Taiwan. But it met with fierce political resistance from the most important lobby of all in the world of education, which is parents. I remember I was at NTU one time, and there was a group of mainland students at NTU, and I asked them, how many of you are there? And as it turns out, there were 10, just 10 students from mainland China at National Taiwan University. And I was later talking to a parent of a Taiwanese student, and she said, "We don't want any more. They work too hard." Well, you know, in the fullness of time, a greater integration and there's an enormous amount of research and other cooperation between Taiwan and mainland universities. It would be a tragedy if that were diminished by the tensions that are going on now, but it could easily be, but it won't be good. Taiwan needs to be an open place for talent to come in as well as for talent to go out in order to thrive in the long run.
Thank you, Bill. Cindy, would you like to add anything?
Yeah, if I may add something, I think this question that TSMC founder Morris Chang was asked by an analyst several years ago about this brain drain crisis, because we've seen news like that from time to time that there are Chinese companies trying to get Taiwan's talents or Taiwan's engineers to China, and then how does TSMC cope with that? Morris Chang replied to that analyst at that time by saying there are basically three things that TSMC is doing trying to stop things like that from happening. They are, first, TSMC will give those talent really, really good package, of course, to make them want to stay at a company. And the second one is they will try to cultivate those talent and make them enjoy their work, enjoy what they're doing at a company. And the third one is they have to believe that staying at the TSMC is a better choice than going to anywhere else. So these are the three things that Dr. Zhang said at that time that they're trying to do to keep those talent. And I believe they're true. I think many people, especially these young graduates in Taiwan, I believe that TSMC is definitely one of their best choices for a career. So it's definitely attractive to stay at a global company like TSMC. But also at the same time, China did give very attractive package to attract those talent, especially semiconductors talents from Taiwan. And we've seen that investigators in Taiwan, they're ramping up to check those Chinese companies set up in Taiwan to see if there are any irregularities among their operations in Taiwan to prevent them from illegally or improperly attract Taiwan's talents to their Chinese business. So the government is working hard on that. Back to you, James.
Thank you very much, Cindy, for that insight as well. We also had another question about talent, but I think that actually our discussion just now answered that other question about how Taiwan can improve its talent. So it sounds like we've already taken care of that question. I'd like to pivot to a couple of questions that have asked about industries other than semiconductors. So one question is, which Taiwanese industry do you believe is the next breakout star to capture the international market? Maybe I could have your thoughts about that one.
Maybe Cindy I've spoken quite a bit about some of these things like EV and healthcare.
Okay, that's a tough one. That's a question we've constantly asked ourselves about in the newsroom, because we're trying to find another superstar, the next superstar after TSMC. And I believe that's a question many investors in Taiwan want to know as well, because everybody wants to know what's the TSMC in the next 10 years or 20 years so that people can buy their shares now and wait for to profit later. So that's a target. That's a question like everybody in Taiwan is asking, I believe. And I think for now, I don't really have a very good answer for that. Maybe healthcare industry is something that Taiwan government is working really, really hard on. So like for the pandemic this time, Taiwan also has to like rely on itself to locally develop those COVID-19 vaccines. That would be a huge help as well, other than the vaccines we procure from overseas. And government has set up some funds to support healthcare or biotech industries in Taiwan in terms of R&D, in terms of like new drugs development, etc. So healthcare or biotech industry could be another industry that's that will take off a few years later from now, other than semiconductors.
Ken, do you have a clue? I have an idea, but I think you actually know more. So you want to try?
Yeah, I'll give it a shot. So again, I mentioned before on electric vehicles. I think that's a pretty natural, say, transition from our current strength in semiconductor and also microelectronics. Now, although I understand it's very different, but I think where the EV is going, some people say it's really a computer on wheels, right? So I think more and more that digital content is going to be more and more important in the definition of automobile, right? And also that definition is being changed very much, right? Once things are autonomous and really mobility as a service. So I see, Taiwan really building on top of that. And of course, like I mentioned, Foxconn is taking a lead through more of an ecosystem play, right? So I think that's super important, instead of just being, okay, let's take another order, let's manufacture, but they're really trying to drive and become the open ecosystem, right, of EVs. And I agree with Cindy on healthcare. If you think about industries that's going to be transformed and really driven by data, for sure, healthcare is one, right? It's really where data and also the domain knowledge converge. And again, Taiwan is well positioned for that, right? Some people say Taiwan, we don't have a large population, but I will say the completeness of Taiwan in terms of this data is, again, no country really compares, right? So I think Taiwan, once we start really utilizing that content, that data, in a good way, I think that's going to be really a thriving industry. And in addition to the data, I think we have the ecosystem around IoT and devices as well, right? So I think that's another area where, again, where locally I'm working quite a lot with these companies, not only providing the healthcare as a service, but also the ecosystem around that with devices, intelligent edge, doing whether it's a remote healthcare solution or intelligent healthcare. So I would say that's probably the two areas that I see moving forward. Professor Kirby?
Yeah, I think those are all excellent ideas and more likely than any other segments that I can imagine. I think right now we're in a situation where TSMC is so incredible, so successful, so dominant in the Taiwan market. Just look at it, the percentage of it on the TAIEX, on the index. It's just extraordinary. And it distinguishes itself not just by its technology, which it does, but by its innovation of being, going back decades now, a foundry and the first standalone foundry to establish an altogether new model. And yet we have to remember that it was the convergence of the aims, not necessarily a specific goal, the aims of a powerful economic bureaucracy that still existed in the 1980s, much stronger then than it is today in Taiwan, that could clear out a whole area of Hsinchu, that could recruit the senior executive from Texas Instrument and a wide range of others, give that person a truly unusual latitude to succeed over time. That's something, I don't think we're going to see a duplication of this. I mean, I think, unless you can think of an area where the government is absolutely prescient and can actually assist an extraordinary private entrepreneur to have that level of initial success, initial capital and support, but then leave them alone. That's not an easy thing for any government to do. It's a rare accomplishment, so I don't think we should expect its replication very easily. The risk, but you can see that the same, mainland China used the exact same model in setting up SMIC in Shanghai, in the Zhangjiang Industrial Park. Clear out a huge part of Pudong. Invite a Texas instrument, in this case Richard Zhang, to come and establish a new company and see what happens. Well, it doesn't always work, does it? Because SMIC has failed to meet any expectations that have ever been set for it compared to TSMC. But I don't think this is a risk, but TSMC is so important, so good, so central to Taiwan's economy. Seeing other industries develop is actually essential for Taiwan's long-term development. You don't want 20 years from now to look back and think of TSMC as Taiwan's Nokia. I don't think that will happen. I am quite certain it will not happen because it's such an extraordinary company and not so limited as Nokia. But then we can talk about the Finlandization of Taiwan in a different context than what people say in political terms. I'm optimistic both about the company and about Taiwan, but it is so successful, I don't see a successor to it in early terms.
Yeah, thank you, Bill. It just really reminds me of how historians who've looked at TSMC, like yourself, have really noted how remarkable its case is. I think that the moment that you're speaking of, the developmental state entering into a public-private partnership at specifically that time, as written by like Megan Green and Tom Gold, I think it really points to a unique time in Taiwan's history. And I hope that that success continues. I think that Taiwan states, the role of the Taiwan government with regards to its overall economy, I think is still in a place that is slightly different than the more neoliberal perspectives that we have here in the United States. And I hope that this model continues to persist. So we're almost at the end of time. I think I'd like to squeeze in just one final question, two questions actually that are related. Keeping in mind the time, and obviously it's very late for Bill because he's based out in the East Coast. The two questions that are somewhat related, one is how does the ubiquity of semiconductors in automobiles, in Internet of Things, change the United States Taiwan policy stance, especially in light of regional tensions? And the second question from a different audience member, but very much related, is are you sensing any major shift in political sentiment towards US-China-Taiwan relations between the Trump and the Biden administrations? So I'm hoping that we could maybe just take about 45 seconds from each of us if you'd like to answer this question to sum up. I know it's a complicated question, but we'll do our best. Maybe I could have Cindy go first.
Okay, we've seen dramatic expansion of ties between Taiwan and US over the past few years. I think we can date it back from former US President Donald Trump. After his election in late 2016, the then president took an unprecedented phone call from Taiwan's leader Tsai Ing-wen, and then that shattered the decades of diplomatic protocol and also is a prelude to the warm-up US-Taiwan ties. And now I believe the partnership between US and Taiwan is deepening over the past few years, and partly that's due to the critical importance of Taiwan's semiconductor industry. And also, on the other hand, that we have seen US and Taiwan have signed various pacts to form alliance over topics like economy and defense. We have signed a memorandum of understanding last November to establish annual economic talks for 5 years. And after that, we have already held the first supply chain dialogue in February, and then the next supply chain dialogue will take place in August. So the partnership between US and Taiwan in terms of economic and defense and the various aspects has been really deepening, and I believe will continue for the following years.
Very timely. Thank you, Cindy. Any responses from Bill or from Ken in the last minute we have?
Well, I'll take on the question on U.S.-China in a different way, and looking again more at the macro political strategic thing. I think, if I and my friends in Taiwan, some of whom are in government, I think one should always beware friends bearing unexpected gifts. And there are many people in the United States who want to use Taiwan as a kind of a moral or political battering ram against mainland China. That is not necessarily good for Taiwan. I think and a number of these people who speak broadly about the need to make very clear our intentions to do this or that in the event of a Taiwan mainland confrontation, actually, A, know very little about Taiwan, and B, care even less about Taiwan. They care much more about their sense of America's role in the world and and they're extremely paranoid about the threat coming from China. So happily, the leaders of Taiwan's government and in its foreign ministry, National Security Council, they know this. And they understand some of the political motivations of those who might strengthen U.S.-Taiwan formal relations at the cost of Taiwan's security. And I think it would be a terrible mistake to go down that path. I would hope that in the coming year, that the Biden administration and the leaders in China would begin to grab, as one of my colleagues puts it, some low-hanging fruit in the U.S.-China relations. Reopen the Houston and Chengdu consulates, ratchet down the idiotic trade war, which has hurt America more than any other part of the world, and a series of other things. Restart the Fulbright program, but symbolic things that could begin to set a more cordial, professional, and predictable relationship between Beijing and Washington. And that kind of relationship is much better for Taiwan, in my view, than a contentious one. The last thing I will say, and I know this is not a popular idea in Taiwan, and it's not a popular idea in the mainland. We had this old 1992 Suoeda consensus, right, of Gu Zhenfu and Wang Daohan. And we all know that it was a consensus. It was a fiction as a consensus. It was an agreement to disagree, and an elegantly done agreement to disagree by two elderly gentlemen who were highly respected. Knowing that and understanding the political difficulty of returning to that in Taiwan, it's not that hard. This is why, people in government should get much higher salaries, because they should, we have the one China policy between the United States and China, which is also an extraordinary fiction set out by Henry Kissinger and Zhou Enlai to make a square a circle. Leaders of 2021 should be able to do better than leaders of 1992 and come up with a consensus that could stabilize the relationship, normalize to a degree the relations, but and to return to what I think is the ideal for Taiwan, certainly in the short and medium term, normalization without unification, because there is no appetite and no constituency for unification on Taiwan with the mainland of China. But the status quo is getting shakier, and we need to be, I think, more proactive in how we address it.
All right, thank you, Bill. We are now well over time, so I will end it here. I want to give a round of applause. Thank you so much, Cindy, to Bill, to Ken, for a fantastic discussion. I really appreciate all of your time. Yeah, I look forward to continue discussing this in the future. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Professor Lin.
Thank you. Thank you all. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye-bye. Thank you all. Take care.
Take care. Stay safe.
And you.